this video, we're going to talk about the selection tools. The selection tools are a group of tools up here in the toolbox that allow you to select a certain area of your artwork and change it in many different ways. There's also some options under Edit that relate to the selection tools, particularly Select All, Deselect All, and Invert Selection. So first, let's start off with these tools. The crop tool is a way of cropping out parts of your picture. Generally, we want to have that figured out before you start in on your artwork. You know the move tool, it's a way you can move layers around like this. And that brings us to the selection tools. The first selection tool we're going to use is called the marquee tool. The marquee tool, when I click on it, gives us all these different options on this top bar. I could either do the rectangular marquee or the elliptical marquee. Rectangular one makes rectangles, the elliptical will make circular shapes. There's also a constraint where you can type in the number of pixels by the number of pixels, and it'll actually keep that size. And there's also feathering, which allows you to make the edges of it somewhat transparent and gives it a nice organic sort of cut versus a really sharp cut. So let's start out to use the selection tool. I just want to remember which layer I'm on. Right now I'm on the blue Van Gogh layer, and I'm just going to make a box around Van Gogh's head. When I release my mouse, you can see these little ants marching kind of show up, and that means this area is selected. With this area selected, I could use lots of different tools and it would isolate so the tools only work in that selected area. So if I use like the brush tool, you can see when I paint, the brush tool only works within that selection. I'm just going to hit Edit Undo, which is Control Z is a quick key to undo that. Additionally, if I have a selection, I could use a lot of the filters and adjustments like hue saturation to alter just that area's colors. I don't know if you can see that. So it helps us isolate areas. The function that you'll probably be using the most is for cutting things out and copying and pasting. So let's say I want to cut this out. In order to cut it out, if I were just to be on the marquee tool, this just moves the selection around the selection box. So if I didn't get it quite right, I can shift it around. In order to actually cut it out, I have to go back to the move tool, and that will cut it out. So then I'm cutting it out of that sheet, that layer. This isn't generally a way that you want to work. When I do this, when I let go, it will kind of fix itself in there. So let's say I deselect now to get rid of the marching ants. Edit, deselect, Control D is the quick key. Now when I use the move tool, the whole thing moves all together, and I've just lost all of this information that's behind Van Gogh's head, like the button on his coat and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to step back using Control Z, which is Edit Undo. You can use Edit Undo for a few steps, but you won't be able to edit undo all the way back to the beginning of your artwork. So just realize that that'll work if you remember to undo it right away. A better way to cut and paste would be to actually copy my selection. So if I go to Edit again, I can go to Copy, Control C is the quick key, and then Edit, Control V is to paste. So I'll do Control V. Now you can see it took that and it made an additional copy of my selection. If I look over in my layers, and you can see this is independent of the one that I just had. So I didn't really alter my background. I just altered that one photograph, that one part of the selection rather. So if you look here, it made a whole new layer for my new cutout section, which is great. I can rename this layer head layer. Or head, Van Gogh head maybe would be a better label. Then I can move those around and I still have that original layer. So this is a great way of cutting it out. And I'm just going to delete this layer and talk a little bit more about some of the other tools. So that was the marquee selection tool. Let's say you wanted something a little more precise. For that, I'm going to zoom in and I want to cut out his head. I'm on the move tool again, so now I can grab it and move it around. And for this one, I'm going to use what's called the lasso tool. When I click on the lasso tool, you'll see my options change up here. I can use the freehand, which is just like drawing, or I can use the polygon lasso, which makes straight lines, kind of dot to dot drawing. And again, I have feathering that I could do or not do. So let's say I want to cut exactly his head out with the hat. So I'm just clicking and holding my mouse down and circling what I want to select. And you really need a steady hand for this, and I'd highly recommend using a mouse or even a stylus would work really well for cutting something out like this. And then I let go. The thing about using the freehand lasso tool is you have to always go right back to the beginning. If you don't do that, it will just make a straight line when you release the mouse. So think about where you started and remember to go all the way back to where you started. Now this is a pretty good cutout. I'm going to do a edit, copy, edit, paste, or Control C, Control V, and there I can see I've got this cutout. And many people at this point will say, oh, I missed a little bit here, and they'd go over and they'd take the eraser tool and they just erase that little bit off to be precise, which is a perfectly fine way of doing it. Go back to the move tool, and you can see I started to clean that up. But let's go back to my selection here. I'm going to select it again. This time, before I select it, I'm going to put a little bit of feathering on. Feathering will blur the edge so it isn't such a harsh cut. So I'm going to feather it maybe 4 pixels. We'll see what that does. Well, I'll just give an example. If I feather it 46 pixels and then I draw and then I release and I move it, you'll see it gives it that kind of fuzzy edge to it. So instead, I'm going to not make it such a harsh number. So I'm only going to feather it a few pixels, maybe 8 pixels. I don't know, we'll see what that does. And generally you don't want to make a sharp edge cut. It just doesn't look realistic. And this time I'm going to go around it again and cut it out as best I can. It's difficult to do this. You got to have a really steady hand, and your mouse has to be set correctly. So I'm going all the way back to the beginning and letting go. And there's my cutout. And at this point, I can see that I missed some sections. So I'm actually going to zoom in and fix that before I even cut it out. Copy and paste. So with the lasso tool, also with the elliptical marquee tool and the wand tool, if I hold down Shift, notice I get a plus sign. So now I can take my lasso and just add on what I missed. So I'm just holding down Shift as I do this and circling what I missed. You have to go back to the beginning with the lasso tool. That's kind of the key thing to remember. I'm trying to do a nice job to get everything that I want. If I don't go back to the beginning, I'll show you what that looks like. I start way at the top of his head. If I let go right here, many times it will just create a straight line all the way up there. Here, I notice I went a little bit over. So you can also subtract selections too. Go way up here, get that back on there. So to subtract on a PC, and I believe on a Chromebook, if I hold down Control, it will give me a little minus sign. Now I hold down Control and I just circle what I don't want to get a more precise selection. That way I can just kind of go along here. And again, you could use the eraser tool. I like doing it this way because when I do my feathering now, it will put it on that whole selection before I cut it out. So give it that little blurry edge, which is kind of nice. Here I need to hold down Shift to add it on. Maybe a little bit more. And the more precise you are with this, the better. Now, as you've noticed, I've kind of moved around the screen with this hand tool. and that's down here. And that allows me to keep still on the lasso tool. If I hold down spacebar, it brings me automatically to the hand tool, so I don't have to click up and do that each time, which is kind of handy. Okay, just maybe up here I need to fix, and then I'll have it cut out, and we'll see what the feathering does. Control will subtract this, circle it, subtract that little bit I missed there. Alright, now I'll zoom out and see how we did. And I'm going to Edit, Copy, which is Control C, Edit, Paste, Control V, and there we go. That's a pretty good cutout of his head. Now I'll just hide this layer, the layer beneath it, and you can see that little bit of blur on the edge. I could have done it a little bit less and it wouldn't have looked so bizarre, but it's not quite as sharp edged. And that's how you cut out with the lasso tool. I also wanted to show you how to use the wand tool, the magic wand tool. That is this. I'm going to zoom into this pug picture that I have here. And I'm actually going to hide my background. So you see that this has a white background. The great thing about that is the wand tool, I can select just that white background, because the wand tool selects individual pixels that are close to one another in color. So if I were to click on his vest here, oh, and this leads me to another discussion. Think about which layer you're on. Right now I'm on layer 0, which is the background layer. I actually want to be on the pug layer in order to select something from this pug. So when I'm on the pug layer, I can click here and you can see it selects from that picture. But if I were to click on the Van Gogh layer and click on the pug, it's actually picking from the Van Gogh layer. You can see it picked from his eyes. So just remember which layer you're on as you go. Here's my selection. I need to get rid of that. I'm going to go up to Select or Edit, and deselect all, which is Control D is the quick key, and that will get rid of that selection so I can do a different selection. But what the wand tool does is it's looking for colors that are similar to the pixel that I click. So it clicked on a green one, and it's picking all these colors that are close to it. Now if I hold down Shift, it will select even more colors that are close to it. So I'm expanding the number of colored pixels that it's picking to ones that are green, but also a little bit further away from green, maybe some of the darker colors. And I can easily pick out his vest really quick. It's just looking for colors and picking light colors. Now here's a cool trick if you can find pictures with white backgrounds. Let's say I want to select just the pug. I'm going to Control D to deselect that. I'm just going to click on the white. That really quickly selects all the white. If I press delete now, I can delete everything away on the white, and there's the pug. I also could do an edit, select invert selection. Now rather than white being selected, it's the pug and everything around the pug. So now when I move him around, you can see it cuts him out from that background. So I could actually just copy paste, and it would just be the pug in my new layer. Here, I'll hide this one. So just cut out that pug. And if I put him, I'll name this cutout pug. You'll see when I put him above Van Gogh, and I show Van Gogh, he's cut out nicely. If I feathered that edge, it'd probably look even better. And those are some of the selection tools that you might use and some of the different ways that you would use them using Pixlr.